It was Owen's birthday. He had known about it for weeks and said nothing to anyone. No cake, no plans, no day off. He left for work at 5 in the morning, before his daughter even woke up, because last week he had spent every penny he had on her birthday party, and that was enough. That was more than enough. He came home at 9 that night and went straight to the kitchen for a glass of water, and that was when he saw the note on the fridge. It was in his daughter's handwriting, and the first word was Dad, and by the second sentence he had to sit down on the kitchen floor. If this story stays with you, drop a comment below and let us know where you are watching from, and please subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Owen Marsh was 42 years old on a Tuesday in April, and he told nobody. Not his supervisor at the painting company where he had worked for 7 years, not his co-worker Pete, who noticed most things and would have made a production out of it, and not the woman at the gas station where he stopped every morning for coffee, who had wished him a happy birthday last year because he had made the mistake of mentioning it once. He had not made that mistake again. He was not a man who required a fuss. He was a man who required a functioning van and enough work to keep the lights on, and his daughter Lily fed and happy, and he had both of those things. And that was what 42 looked like, and he was fine with it. The previous Tuesday had been Lily's birthday. She had turned 11 in the backyard of their rented house on Alderton Street, with 6 friends, a borrowed speaker, and a chocolate cake from the bakery on the corner that had Lily's name written on it in pink icing, and which she photographed from 4 different angles before anyone was allowed to cut it. He had also given her the bike. He had found it 3 weeks earlier on a neighborhood buy and sell page, scratched and bent at the front fork, and had straightened it himself and repainted it red over 2 evenings in the garage while Lily slept. She had cried when she saw it, the good kind, and ridden it up and down the street 4 times before the party even started. He checked his bank balance the morning after her party while she was watching television. The number was what it was. He had known it would be what it was. He closed the app and put his phone in his pocket and made pancakes for breakfast, and that was the end of that. The morning of his own birthday, he signed up for a double shift before 6 a.m., texting his supervisor from the kitchen while the coffee brewed. There was a job on the north side that needed a second pair of hands, and Tom had been asking for volunteers all week. Owen texted yes, and Tom texted back immediately, the way people text when they are relieved. It was a Tuesday, and Lily had school, and Mrs. Chen next door was always home on Tuesdays, and would keep an eye out the way she had been keeping an eye out for 3 years, since Owen mentioned once that Lily was sometimes alone after school, and Mrs. Chen had simply said, well, she doesn't need to be, and that had been that. Owen put the cereal box on the counter next to a clean bowl and wrote Lily a note that said, back late, there's soup in the fridge, love Dad. Ordinary, careful, as if the day were nothing. He left at 5:40, before Lily was awake. He did not look back at the house when he pulled out of the driveway, which was something he sometimes did and sometimes didn't, and this morning he didn't, and he pointed the van toward the north side and turned the radio up and drank his coffee while it was still hot and did not think about the date. Lily came downstairs at 7:15 and found the cereal and found the note and poured herself a bowl and sat at the kitchen table. The calendar on the wall was the kind that came free from the hardware store every January, the sort with a different landscape photograph for each month, and Owen had written things on it in blue pen, school events and dentist appointments, and the dates Lily's library books were due. April's photograph was a mountain lake. Lily looked at the calendar from the kitchen table while she ate her cereal, specifically at the square for today, which had nothing written in it. Not because her father had forgotten. He never forgot anything that mattered. But because he had not written it down for himself, which was different, and Lily had known the difference since she was 7 years old. She finished her cereal, put the bowl in the sink, and picked up her phone and called Mrs. Chen. The call lasted 11 minutes. Owen was 40 minutes up the highway by then, both hands on the wheel. He did not know that his daughter had just hung up the phone and was standing in the kitchen in her school uniform with the look on her face he would have recognized immediately if he had been there to see it. The look she got, when she had decided something and was already 3 steps into doing it. The look that was entirely her mother's and entirely her own at the same time. He was just driving, and behind him, in the small rented house on Alderton Street, his 11-year-old daughter had already started planning the one thing he had never once planned for himself. Mrs. Chen had lived next door to Owen and Lily for 6 years, 2 years longer than Owen had been there at all, and she knew the rhythms of that house, the way you know things that have been close to you for a long time. She knew Owen left before 6 on double shift days, and that Lily came home at 3:20 and let herself in with the key on the hook by the door. She knew Owen kept soup in the fridge when he was going to be late, and that Lily ate it standing at the counter because she could never be bothered to wait for it to heat. She knew they were fine, the two of them, that fine was real, and not just something Owen said when people asked, but she also knew, the way neighbors know things, that fine and celebrated were not the same word. When Lily called at 7:20, Mrs. Chen was already at her kitchen table with her tea. She listened to Lily explain what she needed. In the careful, organized way Lily explained things, item by item, no wasted words. When Lily was finished, Mrs. Chen said yes to all of it, without negotiating a single point. She had 2 questions. One was whether Lily had enough money, and Lily named the exact amount she had saved and what she planned to spend it on, and Mrs. Chen did not offer to top it up, because she understood Lily had not called her for money. The second question was what time Lily needed to go to the shops after school. Lily said 3:30. Mrs. Chen said she would be at the door. Owen worked 12 hours, 2 job sites, the kind of work that is not difficult but is long, and by the time he drove home, his shoulders ached, and he had eaten nothing since a gas station sandwich at noon. He drove home in the dark thinking about the soup in the fridge, and whether Lily had finished the homework due Thursday, and whether there was enough milk for morning. The ordinary inventory of a man driving home to a life he was responsible for and did not resent. The street looked exactly the same when he turned onto it. Same houses, same lights. He pulled in, cut the engine, sat for a moment with the quiet settling around him. Nothing told him anything was different. He let himself in, dropped his keys, and went straight past the dark living room to the kitchen, because the kitchen was where the soup was. The kitchen light was already on. On the table there was a plate with a slice of chocolate cake, homemade, slightly uneven on one side, the icing applied with generosity and no particular precision. In the center was a single candle, burned all the way down to a small puddle of wax. Next to the plate was a card, with Happy Birthday Dad on the front, in Lily's handwriting, the exclamation mark too tall for the line. Owen stood in the doorway and looked at the cake and the burned-down candle, and understood that his daughter had known all week, had said nothing while knowing, had made the cake with Mrs. Chen that afternoon, and had waited up long enough to light a candle before going to bed without him. He sat down and opened the card. Inside it said, "We already celebrated, but Mrs. Chen helped me make the cake this afternoon, and I saved you the best piece, and there is more in the fridge." He opened the fridge. On the middle shelf next to the soup he had left her was a small package, wrapped in paper that had been folded and taped more times than necessary, with his name on the outside and below it, in smaller letters. "Open this last. Read the fridge note first." Owen stood with the fridge door open and the cold air coming out, and looked at his name in his daughter's handwriting, on something she had bought with her own money, and he held it together, mostly. He closed the fridge and turned around slowly, and he saw it. He had come in through the kitchen and gone straight to the table, and had not properly looked at the fridge until now. There was something held to it by a magnet, 2 pieces of paper covered in small handwriting, that had not been there this morning when he left in the dark. Owen stood in his work clothes and looked at the note on the fridge, and did not move toward it yet, the way you stand at the edge of something, when you know the moment you step forward, everything is going to change. If you have ever done something quietly for someone you love, and hoped they would never find out, drop a comment below. We are not here to judge, we are simply here together. Owen crossed the kitchen and stood in front of the fridge. The note was held up by a magnet shaped like a sunflower that Lily had bought at a school fair 2 years ago, and which had been on the fridge ever since, moving from message to message the way useful things do. The note itself was written on the backs of 2 pieces of homework paper, the lined kind from her school notebook, and Lily had used both sides of both pages, the handwriting starting out at its usual size and gradually getting smaller as she ran out of room, the way it always did when she had more to say than she had space for. Owen unpinned it carefully, the way you handle something you already know matters, and sat down at the table next to the untouched cake. She started with the bike. She wrote that she had seen him in the garage on the second night, had come downstairs for a glass of water at 10:30 and seen the light under the garage door, and looked through the small window and watched him sanding the frame in his old work clothes without knowing she was there. She had gone back to bed without saying anything. She wrote that the red was exactly the right red, and that she had known it was him who chose it, and not just whatever color the shop had, because he always noticed what she liked without asking. Owen read that sentence twice, and looked at the ceiling for a moment, and then kept reading. She wrote about the bank balance. She wrote that she had been standing in the kitchen doorway the morning after her party when he checked his phone, and that she had seen his face, just for a second, before he closed the app and started making pancakes. She wrote she was sorry the party cost so much, and she wrote it without drama, without making it into something large, just a plain sentence in the middle of the page, the way she said most true things, quietly and directly, and without asking for anything back. Owen put his hand flat on the table and pressed it down and kept reading. Then the note turned. He felt it happen the same way you feel a room change temperature, not sudden but definite. Lily wrote that she had been saving her pocket money since January, listing the amounts month by month, the handwriting slightly smaller now as the paper ran short. She had decided in February what she was going to spend it on, and had not told him because he would have said it wasn't necessary, and she disagreed. She wrote that disagreeing with him was something she was allowed to do, even when she didn't say it out loud, which was something Mrs. Chen had told her once, and which she had decided was true. She wrote about Mrs. Chen. She wrote that Mrs. Chen had been coming over on Tuesday afternoons for 3 years, not just to keep an eye on the house, but to sit with Lily and have tea and talk, and that Lily had never told Owen because she thought he might feel bad about it. But she wanted him to know now because Mrs. Chen was the one who helped her make the cake and walked to the shops with her that afternoon, and she didn't want him thinking she did it alone. She wrote that Mrs. Chen said Owen was one of the good ones, and Lily wrote that she agreed, which she said was also something she was allowed to decide for herself. Owen laughed at that, a short, surprised sound in the quiet kitchen, and he did not stop reading. She wrote about the essay. Her class had been asked to write about their hero 3 weeks ago, and she had written about him and got the highest mark in the class, and her teacher had asked her to read it out loud at the front of the room, which she had done, and which she had not told him about, because she was 11, and being 11 meant some things were embarrassing, even when they were also good. She wrote that the essay was folded inside the parcel, and she wanted him to read it, and she wrote that she had put it in there, and then taken it out 3 times before deciding to put it back in for good, and that deciding to leave it in was the hardest part of the whole plan. Then there was one more line. The handwriting was the smallest it had been, pressed into the very bottom of the second page, as if she had almost run out of room and almost run out of courage at the same time, and kept going anyway. Owen read it, and then read it again, and then set the 2 pages down on the table very carefully, the same way you set down something you do not want to damage, and looked at the wall for a long moment, and then looked at the package sitting on the middle shelf of the fridge with his name on it, and understood that he was going to have to sit on the floor. The last line read, "You are my favorite person in the whole world, and I wanted you to have a good birthday, even if you didn't want one." Owen sat down on the kitchen floor. Not in a dramatic way, not a collapse, just a slow, careful lowering of himself, until he was sitting with his back against the cupboard under the sink, and the 2 pages of homework paper in his hands, and the linoleum cold through his work trousers. He had been on his feet for 12 hours, and his body was glad for the floor, and his mind was somewhere else entirely. He read the last line one more time. Then he folded the note along its original creases and held it in both hands and sat with it, the way you sit with something you are not ready to put down. He got up eventually, the way you get up when your body reminds you that floors are not designed for sitting on, and opened the fridge and took out the parcel. Light in his hands, small, wrapped in paper cut from a larger sheet and folded with more care than technique. Inside was a keyring. Plain silver with a small enamel disc, painted with miniature paintbrushes fanned out in different colors, the kind of thing you find when you are looking for something that fits a specific person. And Lily had found it, and known immediately. He clipped it onto his keys right there at the table. Then he unfolded the essay. It was 2 pages, double-spaced, written in the neat, careful handwriting that Lily used for schoolwork rather than notes to her father, and at the top in her teacher's red pen, it said, "Outstanding. Read aloud to the class." The title was My Hero, and the name underneath it was Lily Marsh, and Owen read it from the beginning, not skimming, not rushing, the whole thing from the first sentence to the last. She wrote about the bike. She wrote about how he always cut the crusts off her sandwiches, even after she asked him to stop, and how she had decided to stop asking because she thought she might miss it when it was gone. She wrote about the soup in the fridge on late nights, always exactly enough, and always the right kind, and that she had never once come home to a dark house, or a note that didn't say "Love Dad" at the bottom. She wrote that her hero was not a person who did extraordinary things, but a person who did ordinary things, every day, without being asked and without stopping, and that she thought this was harder than extraordinary. And she knew, because she had watched him do it for 11 years. Owen got to the last paragraph and stopped. He read it once, and then sat back and looked at the ceiling, the way he had been looking at ceilings all evening, and he thought about 11 years of soup and crusts and lights left on, and notes that said "Love Dad," all the ordinary things that had not felt like enough, on the nights when the money was short and the tiredness was long, and he understood now, sitting at his kitchen table at 10 o'clock on his birthday in his work clothes, that they had been enough, that they had been more than enough, that his daughter had been counting them, every single one, the way you count things that matter. He heard her door, the soft sound of it opening, her feet on the stairs. She appeared in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas, hair slightly flattened on one side from sleeping, and she looked at him sitting at the table, with the essay in one hand, and the keyring on his keys, and the note folded beside the plate of cake. And she looked at his face, and he looked at hers, and she said, "Is it the good kind?" Owen told her it was absolutely the good kind. She came and sat across from him, and did not say anything else about it, which was exactly right. She made him a cup of tea, which came out slightly wrong in a different way each time, and which he had drunk without complaint on every occasion. He ate the cake, and she told him about her day, the spelling test, and the argument at lunch, and the funny thing the boy 2 seats ahead had done in science that she had been saving for him. Owen listened, and drank the slightly wrong tea, and looked at his daughter across the kitchen table, and thought about his father, who had said once that a good life was not a loud one, just a present one, just showing up. He looked at the keyring on his keys, and thought the showing up went both ways, and he thought he was the luckiest man on Alderton Street. If this story moved you the way it moved us, subscribe and stay close, because every week we bring you another story about the quiet things that turn out to be everything, and not one of them is worth missing.